We are live.
Hey, I see people coming in. Awesome.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Divergent Talent Alchemist. Steph, how are you today?
Oh, I'm super excited. This is a great way to start a Friday for me.
Yay,
Super.
yay. What's your morning like? What have you been up to?
Well, let's see. My son he's 9, so he's in 4th grade, and he did his little school holiday performance this morning. So I was there for an hour already, watching the cute little kids sing songs for 45 minutes. As
Oh, man, that's so much fun. So you've
yeah,
been up and at 'em early.
tis the season. Tis for like lots of. I mean, life is busy anyway, and then you throw on, the holiday stuff, which is super fun and just a little bit extra sometimes. So I
Yeah.
love.
I love that. For those of you who are joining, I'm just going to give Steph a quick introduction. For those of you who don't know, I'm Jen Benford. I'm Write the Divergent Talent Alchemist. I'm a coach, a content creator, fellow multi-passionate, as I'm joined by Stefanie Hingley, who is also multi-passionate. She's a joy coach, a Substack writer, and she's the founder of Inner Edge Coaching. So she brings this beautiful blend of groundedness and mindfulness and real world practicality. She moved from the UK to the US and rebuilt her sense of self, her identity, and her purpose through intention. And now she helps others do the same. So we're going to start the session by welcoming Steph, and she's going to walk us through kind of a mindfulness practice for grounding.
Yeah, hey everybody, and Jen, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been so fun to get to know you and really think about putting this together because I think it comes at a great time for people as well. And so Jen and I, just before we went live, were talking about just the craziness of the season, and even for us, and I always do this anyway, is like a quick grounding exercise, just kind of I would say arrive because even if we're physically here, sometimes our minds are all over the place, thinking about my son's thing, thinking about lunch, thinking about holiday commitments, right? So I just like to fully arrive. And so if you don't mind, if you want to participate or not, if you're driving, please keep your eyes open. But uh, sometimes I really just pause and I create a little bit of space. I like to close my eyes. So if that's comfortable for you to do that, please do. And if not, just kind of lower your gaze or focus in on something and just take a breath. And that alone sometimes is so powerful to just check in with the body, feel your heartbeat. And as we go through the day, even in the mornings, like we leave little pieces of energy behind us. We're making breakfast, we're walking dogs, we're starting our workday. And unless we intentionally close those energy loops, a little piece of energy gets left behind. And so you can recall that energy now. Just say, I have an intention to be present in this moment. I recall all my energy to the here and now, knowing that all of those things will be waiting for you after you give yourself this little break. And I just take a deep breath in and kind of, as I exhale, I sometimes just feel my muscles relax and melt. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and it just feels like even that short thing just helps, bring me. I just have this vision of all this stuff kind of coming and okay, it's back here now. So
I love that. I love that. That was great. I feel so much better because I was thinking about everything I need to do this weekend. And sometimes, to your point, it's really hard to be present. I do Pilates. I know you do some yoga, right? And we
yeah,
we do some of those exercises at the start and at the end of class. And it's just your time, reminding you to take that time for you and be present and leave everything else off the mat. So I love that you bring that into your coaching practice. That's really awesome.
yeah, thank you. I try to bring it in, even incorporate it. And it's so funny because it's a slightly different style, but even or especially then, you're sitting around a boardroom and you're like about to kick off a pretty important meeting. It's like people are frazzled and they've got computers and phones. It's just like, hey, let's just arrive. Because if you're making any kind of decision, you don't want to be doing it with half of your brain. You want to be doing it with your whole brain. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Can you share, Steph, a little bit about you and your story? I know I introduced you pretty quickly, but would love to pivot there and teach everybody a little about you and inner edge coaching.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My background is science first. I was pre med for a lot of my life, and I did biochemistry and biology and loved it. But I also wanted to live abroad. So I had this idea that medicine wasn't going to work. Medicine and law are two things that you kind of get stuck into. Like, you can't, that degree doesn't really travel well. So I decided to go into business simply because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I thought an MBA would be very flexible. And so I did that. And then, yeah, I studied international business because I had that desire to travel abroad. And I had the desire to get my own visa. So I had that flexibility. Flexibility has always really been important to me. So as soon as I was finished with school, I moved over to the UK. I was originally born in Minnesota, hence my accent, you know. So I spent my life there, and then as soon as I was done with school, I went to the UK and was based there for 10 years. Married a Brit. My son was born over there. I myself am now British, which is kind of fun. And then we moved here in 2019. And so I did business development for a long time. So I did the corporate thing over in Europe, and I did a big company like Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies, and startups. And I found, corporate's great, but it gets a little stodgy, sometimes a little rigid. And I thought startups would be cool. Startups have their own totally different vibe. And it was super fun for a period of time. And then it was really fickle. So I was ready to kind of leave that. So I moved over back to the US. Here I'm now in South Florida in 2019 for really my dream job, still like business development. And then kind of had this moment of absolute burnout and loss of identity, and was probably for a year just so lost. And that's a bad time to be lost, really, because I had a young child. We had just moved to another country, and I was trying to figure out and get back on my feet. Like, what do I want to do? I was between jobs, and it was just a really stressful time. So I think in my kind of hitting that bottom and feeling like there were moments where I wasn't even sure how I was going to, pay the bills and stuff. And it was like, wow, how do you go from that background of being, outwardly successful and then come back here and you're like asking parents for money, And I just thought, this is not the life I want to build. So I kind of started over and I did a lot of inner work. And now I'm able to put what seems like a really crazy background with science and business and international, kind of putting all those things together now to work with other entrepreneurs and leaders who feel like a sense of overwhelm and imbalance, and help them to get clarity, help them to find some joy, to build a purposeful life, whatever that means for them. And in so doing, they're able to make aligned decisions much more quickly. They just feel better in themselves because they are, defining success for themselves. And I've been doing that work for about 3 or 4 years now, 3.5 years, I think. So still pretty new at it, but I love the idea of combining things that don't seem like they should go together, like corporate business and ancient wisdom, meditation. We don't meditate, but you take some of the principles, right? And you pull that into a different kind of conversation and kind of bridging those two worlds. And that's been really fun for me.
Yeah, I love that so much because a lot of times we're told, "Hey, leave, your humanity at the door because you're showing up to work." But the reality is you're the same person when you show up.
Yeah,
And so how
totally.
can you bring those principles in to be more grounded in your work? I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I feel like the conversation is starting to shift a little bit. I mean, when I was early in my career, it was very much like, and I was also in a lot of male dominated. So it was like, you're a woman, you're wearing a pantsuit and you're putting your hair up. And God forbid you ever show emotion because that'll get you right kicked out the door. So it's like, but recently I'm noticing that things are changing a little bit and people are having slightly different kinds of conversations. It's not a drastic change yet. It's just this inkling of, people are starting to realize. And I don't know if that's partly because of the tech. People are working more into like weird hours. They're just getting the job done. And then so that the line blurs between work self and home self and mom self and daughter self. And you're like, hey, we're only one person. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
wear all these hats and find a rootedness and a calmness within ourselves so that we can do all of those things. So
Yeah, that's great that the conversation is shifting. I remember rewriting a dress code early on that said women need to wear pantyhose. Kind of like you said, it's like, wait, what? We've come a long way since then.
that would have been bad for me. So, no, because we're not even that old, and it's like, what is it, 1955? But no, it is true. And some of the industries take a little bit longer, but this sort of nice, dynamic now where we're like, I went to a meeting a couple, like maybe 6 months ago, and one of the guys, I don't know if he was totally joking, but he was like, "Are we going to start with a meditation?" I was like, I teach meditation. Don't even toy with me because I'll do it. And they were kind of like, so we had this little discussion. We didn't do it. It would have been not the right time, really. But the idea that conversation even took place and I didn't even start it, I was like, huh, interesting. Right?
But yeah, that's so great because how many times do you join a meeting and everybody's doing a million things? People are distracted. They're checking their email. They're not paying attention to the person that's speaking. And it just, yeah, I think to have that moment at the beginning would be great for every meeting. I understand sometimes, things are busy and we just need to move the needle, but I think it's great to hear that some of that is coming up in corporate.
Yeah. Yeah. Little by little.
Yeah, yeah. How did you? Because you've made this big transition and started your own organization, and you're following your joy, right? Which is what we're here to talk about today. Tell us how you were able to identify those little sparks that made you want to take this pivot.
Yeah. Sparks are my word of the month right now. I love it. And the real answer is it took a long time, and I did not even know that that's what I was looking for. What I knew was I didn't know myself very well. I knew, like, when someone would introduce me, I would say, "Hi, I'm Steph. I'm the VP of marketing," or "I'm the insert title here," or and it's just like these are very outside, easy answers, and they get the conversation going, but they aren't like core. And so I guess the answer to the question is I started thinking about things really differently, and that was not an easy that wasn't like a choice one day. That was like I was at the bottom. I was burned out. I was broke, and I was desperately trying to figure out my next move, and people were trying to help me, and they were like, I don't know how to help you because you just don't know." And, like, I had one woman that was like, "Well, what do you wanna do?" And I was like, "I'm not even really sure. I've done all these different things." And it's like, "Well, okay, well, what industry?" And I've always been industry agnostic, so I couldn't even answer that question. And she's like, "Well, where do you wanna be? Do you wanna stay in Florida? Do you wanna go back to Europe?" And I was like, "I don't know. I mean, I love Europe, but I feel like it's nice to be here." Anyway, I couldn't give them anything to work with. And so they were like, "Well, I don't know how to help you." I didn't know how to help myself. And so I stumbled upon the work of Michael Singer and Deepak Chopra, and I just started like turning inward. I didn't even know what that meant then. I was just taking some time to read a book. And then I thought about the book, and then I did some of the practices, and I learned how to meditate. And I know meditation is kind of a weird word for people because it has a strong reputation, but I just created space for myself to think.
Yeah,
Uh, and so I started really and that took, many, many months, to be honest. But then I started paying attention to what lit me up. Like, if someone picks up the phone, right, and calls me and says, "Can you do X?" What is gonna, like, jump out of my skin? "Yes, I would love to do that." Or is it like, "Oh, crap, well, I guess I have to, so I will." And I'm paying attention to my energetic response to things that people ask of me and things that I just had to do to survive with a 3-year-old at the time. Like, these are the things you go about your day and you're like, "Yeah, that's really kinda cool. I like that. That's really crap." But paying attention to that was really a game changer. And so I
yeah.
started to identify little sparks. And I didn't and they were all over the place, and I didn't know what to do with them. And then over time, they started to kind of show a pattern. And then that pattern kind of pointed to some values and ultimately to what I think now is my purpose. And I think that's an important exercise for people. Even if you're in a great place, like, still think about, like, what are the things that light you up. And so that's where my journey really started.
Yeah. Wow, and Michael Singer, is that the author of The Untethered Soul?
Yes. Yes. Spot on.
Yes.
Yeah,
What
I've got the 3 books of his right here. I mean, this guy and his books, I mean, Untethered Soul, and then he's got the, Living Untethered, and I've got the workbook, and his stuff is he's probably the 1st or 2nd person, that really influenced me on my journey.
Me too. I actually have chills right now because I listened to the audiobook of The Untethered Soul. If you're listening, clearly we both highly recommend this book because it's all about how, from what I remember, and you've done more work at like I've read or listened to that you've dug more into his work, so I want to hear your thoughts. But from my perspective, it was you are not your thoughts, but like you're not the thoughts in your head. Like, who are you really? And that I remember that was a turning point for me because it's like, wait, I had never really thought about it because you're busy and you're always listening to your thoughts. And sometimes there's a lot of conversation going on with that inner monologue, right?
And it's loud. I mean, those thoughts are there's a lot of them. There's I mean, there's different people have different numbers about the number of thoughts. 70,000, 70,000,000, doesn't matter. It's a ton. And I had the same epiphany, light bulb moment. He starts the book by talking about the dinner party thing where you're introducing yourself. And I'm reading it and I'm like, okay, I don't know how I would introduce myself. Like, who are you? Who am I? Oh my God, I have no idea. And it introduces a whole new way of thinking. But the power in understanding that these thoughts are not us is magnificent. And so just kind of keep going on that thread of, and it really is it's a lot lighter too because thoughts come in and you're like, "Oh my god, that's a heavy thought or that's not fun," but they're there, they pass through you. It's kind of like driving down I think in one of the books he talks about like driving down a highway and you see other cars and you see trees and you see buildings and people. You see them in the moment, they pass through you and then you forget about them. Okay? And then we for some reason sometimes grab onto something like maybe there's a particular car or a particular tree. We subconsciously or not attach ourselves to that thing and then we keep it. Well, sometimes that serves us. A lot of times it doesn't. And so if you go through life kind of gathering these things because of our brain's inherent negativity bias, you end up with this collection of like negative kind of crappy things that are constantly there and they influence your thoughts. And so the idea that you can go ahead and let those thoughts in, can't really control that a lot of the time. And you can also let them out. I was like, oh wow,
Yeah.
that's epiphany right there.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, Ellie. I see some people joining. Hi, Rich. Hi, Ellie. Welcome, welcome. We're talking about how to find your joy if you're just joining. So this is such a great conversation, and we're talking about Michael Singer, who Steph's dug into his work, and he's great. If you haven't read his books, done the workbooks, highly recommend. Um, so what what you're talking about is I feel like a lot of people when you ask them, well, who are you? The initial response is gonna be, well, I'm Jen, I'm the HR professional. I've been doing it for 15 years. And now, I'm pivoting into something else. I kind of had a similar journey to you, but I think it's incredible how many people you ask like who you are and many of us have not done that inner work to figure that out. And it's not our faults, right? Because we grow up and society kind of molds us. It starts in school. I know you have some thoughts around this as well. Like you made a comment to me last week when we were chatting about how your son's almost being molded out of himself. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah, I think about that a lot in my own journey, and then I immediately am like, "Holy crap, how much am I screwing up my kid right now?" Because just society in general, and, I do think that there's a certain conformity that is required to exist, as a human, but then that gets layered on when you're in a society and you're going to school and you're made to kinda sit in a classroom and learn a certain thing. I mean, the learning curriculum doesn't change for every individual. If you're lucky, it changes a little bit, like, you might have a gifted, you might have a Spanish, you might have whatever, but it's more or less, standardized. I mean, hence standardized tests, right? And I just feel like what gets rewarded and what gets sort of like unrewarded, not quite punished, but like what gets really what they end up doing is conforming and leaving a little parts of themselves behind. And I see that as really tragic. And I'm like, how do you keep that? Like even a silly example is that my son used to love the color pink and purple. And then he went to school and through many different things. Now he thinks that pink is for girls. I won't get started on the gender thing. I just won't. But the point is that he loved something. And then someone at some stage told him that it wasn't right or he didn't fit in. And then so he changed himself to fit in. And so between all of those different things, like how do you manage that as a parent? And I do struggle with that. I think about it a lot from our perspective, but then also our children.
Yeah, yeah. it's really, really tough because I say this often, but we're asking the wrong questions to kids, and kudos to you because we're asking, what do you wanna be when you grow up? And the reality is we should be asking things like, how do you wanna feel? What do you like doing? Because the worst thing is, and I've experienced this type of trauma, is waking up, 15 years into your career journey and realizing, how the heck did I get here? And, like, part of it for me, like, because I did the master's in HR and the bachelor's and, like, all the continued education, and because we're taught, like, "That's great, that's gonna get you the next job and keep going," and then I lost sight of, like, who I was because I love all the creative stuff, I like making videos and connecting with people, and, I was just some of this other stuff I was doing was so unsexy, but, like, I had a parent who was in HR for 19 years. So if you ask me, why d why did you choose that route? I
Yeah.
mean, in the interview, I didn't answer it that way, but that wasn't gonna get me the
This is
job.
my dream job. I've always known I wanted to be in HR. Yeah.
Right. I, like, love firing people. No, I hated that, by the way, and that's only one component of HR, right? But I think, yeah, we're just taught. I love your example of the colors, like, very simple example of, we're taught that men are not supposed to like pink and purple, but some do. I'm
Yeah.
with you there.
Yeah. I think that, yeah. And I think it goes back to the who you are, but like, what do you love? Like, what brings you joy and like, what, some things you do have to do. Like, you have to learn some basic math just to function. I get that. But like, in general, there's a lot of flexibility there that we could be providing. And I think sometimes we could do a better job of talking to our kids about basic tools and finding what lights them up and kind of fostering that and then supporting them and figuring out the stuff that maybe is a little bit harder but is really important and helpful, but like balancing that out. And I say the same thing to my adult clients. It's like you can't strip your life of everything you don't like. That's just not realistic. But what you can do is pay attention to the balance and the energy balance of, if you have to do something that's really draining and you know that it's important, flank it with something that fills your cup. Or it's almost like a reward in a way, but I don't want to use that word because it feels like temporary. And I'm talking about a system of look at your calendar, look at your day. I know I've got a day full of challenging meetings today, so I'm going to start my day this way. I'm going to give myself a break here. I'm going to step out into nature here, and I'm going to try to find that balance a little bit because I have to do that thing, whatever that thing is. But I know that it's draining, and I know that I can do things on the other side to kind of foster, kind of lift myself up so that I can make it through the day.
Yeah, I love that. I love the frameworks that you're providing to people to help them do that as well. And for those of you who are listening, or if you're listening now, or if you're listening later, um, we have a worksheet. Steph, do you want to talk a little bit about your purpose guide that you created? I think it's an awesome resource for people. We're going to provide.
Yeah, awesome. Sorry, Google just decided to literally log me out. They do this every 2 weeks or so, and you have to put your password in. I had it up,
Yes.
I reference it, and then it does that. But I know what it is, more or less. Yeah. So the worksheet is talking about how you find joy and to what end can we use that as a tool to help us navigate choices that lead to a more joyful and sort of more purposeful life. And really the first step, and we did it at the beginning of this call before we do any of this work, is to like not plow into it. Cause I think that's also something that everybody does, especially if you're high functioning, high achieving, whatever you're busy, you just want to get it done. I always start with a pause and I just get real grounded because otherwise I have done this even recently, earlier this week. I'll just do something, but I'm only giving it half of my energy, half of my attention. And I had to go back and do it again anyway. So give yourself that moment always when you're doing the sort of inner work. I don't like that word because the work sounds bad, but you like that when you're spending time with yourself and just fully arrive. So I always say just even a couple breaths like we did. And then maybe just start a little journal. I've got mine here and I love this journal. It's like I'm documenting the things that I want and I'm documenting the things that light me up. I know, because I love it. Um, and it's really helpful to sort of it's fun, first of all, to pay attention to that stuff. Just that even switch of like, okay, I have to do this thing. Do I feel lit up about that? How do I feel afterwards? How do I feel during? Just paying attention to that sort of thing. But then really paying attention. When was the last time you did something that was so energizing that you just were like, couldn't stop thinking about it, really lit you up? And I don't know if an example comes to mind that you would want to share, Jen, but I'd be really curious when it comes to sparks. Like, anything recently come into mind?
Yeah, oh my gosh. I just started getting brand deals on TikTok, and I love creating videos. I've always loved creating content, taking pictures, videography. So from a young age, I've been doing this. Like I have baby photos where I'm literally having a camera in my hand. And so, I've been making this content and I am loving doing it. It definitely lights me up. Same thing with writing here and the community on Substack. I think that's another place where I really love to be. Um, it's it's been really challenging to find community, especially when like I hadn't sat with myself for 30 years
Mm,
and now I'm 35. I would say like my healing arc has been the last 5 years, starting with, getting alcohol free. So I cut alcohol out completely, surrounding myself with people who have that same energy that I'm looking for, right? Because energy is contagious.
mm,
And finding my way into, work that I love that doesn't actually feel like work, but it's taken me, like to your point earlier, a long time to get there. But I really, really had to sit with myself and to look at myself, and that includes, like, the really ugly parts that I maybe didn't like. It's not easy, but my biggest fear was, like, never meeting myself, and, so I'm still it's a journey, right, every single day, but the videos and all that, that lights me up. I sort of went on a tangent there.
I love it though, because that's a creative in you. And I'm just looking at the chat and I see some people too, like, this is why I haven't gone back to management consulting. The creative got shook out of me as a kid. And I think that does because our society doesn't value it. It's kind of like, oh, do you want to get a PhD? That's cool. But you want to do art? I don't see how you can make a living doing that. And it reminds me of this idea of when you notice a joy or a spark, our brains are wired because I found myself doing this and I was like, "Oh, I love writing. Okay, how can I make a living doing that?" Oh my gosh. I just went from step 1 to step 380. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's part of the story because we all need to earn a living. That's true. But I think, and I work with clients as well, and I ask the question, we go through the process and the framework, and they jump the gun and they're like, well, I like to do scrapbooking, but I don't see how I could make a living doing that. Like, well, we're not having that kind of conversation right now. We're just figuring you out as far like what makes you tick. Write it down, think about it, immerse yourself in the feelings of that. Don't think about like how you're going to get to the next step. I know it's so hard though. It's kind of like, okay, great, I figured myself out. Now what? Like, just sit with that because there's a lot of steps in between as well. And then there's more to the story. And so my journal here of my own sparks and my own desires kind of form like intentions, but not overnight. I've been working on that one for like 2 months. And you start to see themes, you start to see patterns. And so as you sort of think about your sparks and you maybe jot them down, and then you set it aside and you go through your day. And maybe something happens and you go back to it and you write. And then the next day, you do it again. And you don't have to do it every day. The Lord knows the last thing we need is more homework to do, but like more like duration, like couple weeks, right, of doing this exercise. I've really started loving this practice because I only started it like 2 months ago, like I said. And what emerges is really interesting. I know for sure there's a few things that always make the list. But then there's others that change based on where I am, my mood, what's going on in my day. And
Yeah.
so is that you start to notice these patterns.
Yeah, yeah. What are those things for you that are always those non-negotiables?
Yeah, so non-negotiables always at the top of my list is like this sense of freedom. And freedom for me is a lot of things. I like to have a lot of space in my day. I like to get up in the morning and have, I know I've got to do some things, but I don't feel like tied to my desk, for example. So that's something that brings me joy. Like when I see that I have a little bit of flexibility or a little bit of freedom, I love that. There's also the travel component. I mean, I've been abroad. I want to move back there. I would never want to be like, okay, I'm stuck in this house or I'm stuck in this place. And so if that's something that arises for you, it's just something to notice. And so for me, that is what I noticed, and I'm paying attention to that. And I'm starting to see certain patterns around creativity that I had also suppressed for a really long time because I was like, hey, I wrote an article today and I really enjoyed doing it. And it was like really fun for me. And I can't wait to do the next one. Oh, okay. Because if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have said writing sucks and I don't like doing it and I outsource it. And I literally did do that for me. I was like, I don't want to do it.
Right.
Because I was taking a different approach to it, sure.
Yeah.
So I think the patterns that are emerging do point to connection for me. So I love to connect. And I think if you start looking at the story that comes out there, it's like having the freedom and the time to connect. If we're too busy and too rigid, it's hard to connect to other humans. And so, like, it's, well, and animals, everyone, it's hard to connect to yourself. So, um, having that side, that space and having that flexibility. So, just kind of a little bit about, my own patterns and how they kind of fit together. And it is like a bit of art, like looking at connecting the dots.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love it, and there's beauty in entrepreneurship there with being able to manage your day, um, and not have to have those like, you just have more autonomy over your schedule. That's a big one for me too, is that freedom, but I didn't realize that until the last year, but, I think it's important to get aligned with yourself. And so, like, what are some ways or what let me ask you this. What's the biggest misconception that people have about purpose?
Yeah. Well, probably that purpose has to be like this outward thing. First of all, I don't think a lot of people are talking about purpose. I think some people think about it and it's becoming really trendy, which I think could be a good thing. But I think probably the misconception, like when I think about people that have like a really strong purpose, sometimes they're like born with it. They come into this world and they're like, this is my purpose, and their whole life is built around that. And I think there's an idea that if you don't have that figured out by the time you're 20, 30, 40, that you're too late. Like forget about it. I was 43 when I even started having these conversations with myself, right? So I think the idea is that it's not a big scary thing that is like binary. Like I have a purpose. Well, first of all, everybody has a purpose, but I just think for people to and to be able to articulate it, and it's okay that you didn't figure it out when you were 5, and it's okay that you went down a path that maybe your purpose shifted, or maybe your life brought you different opportunities. And so I think the idea about purpose is it's not rigid. It's this big, beautiful, flexible thing that is a North Star for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
think I'm actually answering your question a little bit backwards because it's like misconception, I guess, would be that it's rigid. But the idea really is that it's there to help you. And when you have a better idea what that is, even if it's vague, because I think people have to be like, well, this is exactly what my purpose is. I don't even have an exact purpose. I can roughly articulate it to you, but it's like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be detailed. It just has to be a guiding light, and it has to serve in the sense that it helps you make decisions and it helps you figure out, your joy patterns and bring more joy into your life. And then I think it's done a job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm similar to you. My purpose, if you will, is connecting with people and helping others and sharing storytelling basically about my life. I mean, I think everybody has, to your point, a purpose. I totally agree with that. Some people's purpose is to be a mother, and that's innately what they feel. My birth dad, he was so I was born in Philly, sharing a little personal anecdote here, but I was born in Philly, and both of my birth parents, they couldn't take care of me, right? Because they were heavy into drugs and had some mental health stuff. But my birth dad's purpose was he would walk to and from the AA meetings because he got sober, and he would make the coffee for everybody in the meeting.
Hmm.
And like it makes me want to cry, tearing up about it. I actually never met him. I went to his funeral. Really, really heavy stuff, but that was his purpose, he was helping other people in the way that he could, and I think it's I sat there and I was crying. I was like, "This is such a beautiful thing," and in that moment was when one of the turning points for me when I realized, like, "Okay, wait, I wanna help people." Like, I that's my purpose too, and then I got alcohol free and things started building from there, and I finally started getting in touch with myself, but growing up, it's like one of my parents would tell me, "You should be a lawyer because like, you've never lost an argument." And, like, that would be I would probably be a really good lawyer, but I would also be really overstimulated, really, really stressed, and I know that that's definitely not my purpose. As much as maybe that's something that I could be good at, I don't wanna do that, and I don't wanna be more in debt than I already am, so
Well, thank you for sharing that. That is what I love about that story with your dad too is that purpose doesn't have to be like the purpose is to start a company and change the world or cure cancer. And a purpose can be simply one interaction that frankly you might not even know was changing someone else's life. And I think about that a lot because as a connector, right? You could run into someone at Starbucks or a grocery store or anywhere else, have an interaction, an authentic interaction with them, walk away and you'd forget it. And maybe it changed that person's life. Maybe it saved that person's life. I get goosebumps thinking about it because the reality is that we don't always know the full purpose. We're just going through the day. And if you're kind of like grounded and open, you can serve other people's purposes as well. And sometimes that is like, that's it. And then the rest of it is joy filled. And so this is why I love to talk about joy because purpose and joy are absolutely linked, but joy just for joy's sake is okay too. Like it is brilliant just to have joy, have levity, laugh, connect to no end. Not everything has to have a purpose. Not everything has to have like a deliverable, in a
Right.
right. So I love this idea of just like, hey, what are we doing here? Part of it is just to enjoy our time on this earth.
Right, enjoy each other's company in the best way we can. Oh, that makes me wanna cry a little bit. You got some hearts too. As you
Yeah,
were speaking, I saw them floating up there.
thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Tell you're starting a coaching, right, on Substack, so I think people need to hear more about that because 'cause I'm really excited for what you're building.
Thank you. Me too. I on Substack just in August actually, and so I've been doing a lot of like just writing mostly. And I was thinking I'm putting out articles and things, and I mean, I think they're good. Of course I do. I wrote them, right? But I mean, they're just articles. And I was like, how can we go deeper with people? Because I'm getting some feedback that these are good, but like taking something from insight to action sometimes requires another level of support, guidance, community, whatever you want to call it. And so I was thinking about that because I also do coaching like one on one. And that's a very different thing as well. And that's very intensive. And there is a cost associated to that. Is there something in between sort of just this article and, this one on one coaching? And where I landed was trying to create a middle ground, which is the paid membership of it's going to look a little bit like group coaching. It's going to look like more interactive, but the idea is to take some of the content and just bring it to life a little bit. So I'll always start with an article and I'm going to focus on themes every month. So there'll be monthly themes. December's, for example, we're talking about boundaries, which is a good theme for coming up in the holiday period. Definitely joy. But like boundaries are great. Everybody knows about boundaries, but I think very few people are comfortable establishing and maintaining them. And so the group this month is focusing every week on a different piece of the boundary and practicing like, okay, how do we link it to a value? How do we practice setting? And then what kind of almost like I would say a script. It's not like a literal script, but it's a thing that you say when you need to uphold your boundary because it's so easy for us to be like, okay, I have a boundary there, but it's being crossed and I'm going to let it go because there's this exception or because this person asked, right? And so that's the work that I'm hoping to do with the membership, which is the studio, the Inner Edge Studio, which is the next layer up. And then we'll do some live calls as well in a group setting. And my hope is that it just kind of gives another layer of support so people can action some of the topics.
Yeah, I love that so much. I love that you're making it, like, accessible for people. I think that's really, really important. That's gonna be fantastic. For those listening, what are 1 to 2 things that they can start doing today?
Oh, yeah, this is good. Well, I think the first thing is just to give yourself some space. Maybe a lot of you are already doing this, but if you're not, just give it a try. I mean, I mentioned the word meditation. It doesn't have to be that at all, and it doesn't have to be a half an hour of whatever. It has space. If you have 2 minutes, give yourself the gift of 2 minutes. Or if you have a meeting that gets canceled, this happened to me the other day, and I was like, "Cool, I have an hour. I'm going to do something." I'm like, "No, maybe I'll give myself the gift of a walk outside." And the slowest cup of coffee that I've ever like, I literally put all my attention on grinding the beans and, waiting at the stove without looking at my phone while I made the coffee. And so I would say a couple of things for people to consider. One is just creating that really juicy space for yourself. And if it's uncomfortable, that's normal because we are not used to that. We're used to being constantly stimulated. So don't start with like a 15-minute thing. Start with maybe 2 or 5 minutes and just put your phone down and say, I'm going to sit right here or I'm going to stand in the kitchen or whatever, and I'm going to do nothing, right? It's hard to do nothing, but I would say experiment with that. It's kind of the foundational step for a lot of this work because if I gave you a worksheet, I mean, I am going to give you a worksheet, but um, if you look at the worksheet and you just trample into doing mode, you will finish the worksheet and it might be helpful. But if you first sit with yourself and take some time to really think, you know, nothing better is going to come from anyone else except you. You have all of the answers, all of the insight, but we just don't listen to ourselves a lot of the time. So that would be my suggestion and my invitation is to get used to spending time with yourself because you are brilliant and nobody knows you better than you. We just have to like set the stage, maybe give a framework or two, maybe ask a question. If it resonates, run with it. If it doesn't, ignore it. And then just trust and go through that process. But only you can only do that with yourself. So hang
Yeah.
out with yourself a little bit.
I love that. And rediscover yourself and have that curiosity lens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I think that's
Yeah. So good. So good. I'm excited.
yeah.
Um,
Can I say one more thing too? And
of course.
about the curiosity really
Yeah.
as well because another human condition of at least our culture is that we tend to judge a lot of things and it's again there's no fault here, it's an observation that our brains work by looking at anything, hearing something, and immediately passing judgment on it, good or bad. And becoming aware of that is really interesting in its own exercise. All that to say that if you become aware of that and try to apply more of a curiosity lens to it, even if something like, oh, that's a good grade, or I like that song, or that's a beautiful Christmas tree, or that ornament sucks, whatever the thing, we're always like very rare that we can look at something and not have an opinion about it. Even, I mean, obviously, just, a lot of them are just internal, but going back to our thoughts, it's like, how often do we look at something and not judge it? I mean, almost never, yeah, I would say. I mean, it's really hard. Like, the kitchen is messy. I need to do this. Anyway, trying to take a little pause from that, which is really, really hard. Just be even aware of it and get curious about it. Like, oh, yeah, that person, I wonder why that person is doing that thing that really would have irritated me, right? Like it's a judgment, but like get curious about it instead of judging it, or get curious and judge it. I mean, the reality is judging is it's not a button you can just turn off, But if you start framing it a little differently, that could be a very interesting exercise.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're taught to judge. Again, we're taught to think things are a certain way. We're taught, to your point earlier, that women like pink and purple and men don't. And that's not the reality we live in. But I think you can get so caught up and then you kind of lose yourself. And it's easy to get pulled into that negative thought pattern as well. So just kind of noticing when it shows up, to
Yeah.
your point, is really, really powerful first step.
Yeah. Yeah, and then notice what happens when you're stepping into your joy, like when you're stepping into your zone of genius, you might call it. But when you follow that spark and you're doing something that you absolutely love, notice how maybe the judgment shifts a little bit, or your thoughts shift, or your felt sense of being in that experience changes versus maybe doing something else, and just start becoming more aware of these things that we've like almost intentionally muted in order
Yeah.
push the boundaries and achieve and do more and, do whatever it takes kind of thing. You have to suppress a lot of our um, intuition and connection in order to do that sometimes. So it's interesting to go back.
Yeah. Yeah, you're hitting on the locus of control, right? Which we only have so much as a person, what we can and can't control. So, like, I'll give you an example. I was on the phone with a friend the other day. Her car broke down. Like, she was waiting for AAA. She was trying to get back to her mom, like all of these things. Her mom's elderly person. And then she had some weird interactions without, spilling the tea. And I said to her on the phone, I was like, gosh, you're a light in my life because the way you're managing this is so positive. You could be furious. You could be mad at the world because your car broke down and now you got to deal with this person. Oh, and then the AAA person was really new at the job, and so they're trying to tow the car, and there's just this whole thing, and I was like, "Gosh, well, I'm glad that that young kid had you who was understanding in the situation, versus somebody who's, maybe gonna overreact." And I thought about, "Okay, Jen, what would you do in that situation?" Old Jen would be like, "Oh my gosh, screw the world, like, my day's ruined, this is terrible." But a grounded Jen is now more conscious to say, like, "Okay, this is the situation, so how can I make the best of it?" And it's really, really not easy, and I'm still guilty of reacting like old Jen from time to time. But like, if you continue to show up for yourself and identify and recognize those patterns, you're able to kind of shift that behavior. But it takes time, it takes practice, it takes patience. Um, but when you do that, you can be really proud of yourself. And I was proud of my friend because I was like, gosh, you're teaching me, every day.
I love that. Love that story. It's so true. It's so true. It's such a journey, but when you realize that how we react versus respond. So when you react, it's like you're just reacting. And when that happens, emotions go a little, I mean, emotions are strong, but a lot of the times we regret that. And so, and this is the power of the pause as well. Like even in an emotional situation, if you can take even a second or two and breathe and then respond instead of react. And your response doesn't have to be roses and rainbows all the time either. You can still respond with maybe a heavy statement and saying, this is disappointing, like, let's figure out how to do this. That doesn't mean that you're giving everybody the opportunity to trample all over you. It just allows you to be able to look back and be like, yep, I handled that in a good way. That wasn't led with my emotion. It was sparked by emotion. And then I gathered a pause, I collected myself, and I intentionally responded in a way that I feel good about later. And I think that's really important because the universe will also test you on this. The control thing, control is such an illusion sometimes, and like we only hurt ourselves when we do that. For being broken down on the side of the road, and I can totally relate to this. Steph, 5 years ago, can you imagine during the burnout and everything else? I would have lost my mind. There would have
Yeah.
been swear words. I would have hurt people's feelings. I might have sent an angry email. Like no one cares about my angry email. That guy doesn't give a. And so only person I'm hurting is me. And I'm
Yeah.
like, another epiphany moment. Like how I respond really impacts me the most a lot of the time, not always, but so how I respond, like, let's be mindful about that. And like, let's be intentional. And so all of these things are kind of like your guiding post, but it really does start with the space though. I mean, especially when emotions kick in, it's like, I'm really working on my default reaction to be nothing and a deep breath and like feel the bottom of my feet, check in with my feet. Okay, how my feet doing? Okay, wait, just that little tiny micro break is like, okay, back in the moment now. How do we want to proceed?
Yes, yes, yes. I love that so much. Looking around, feeling something, grabbing a blanket, like just
Yes.
activating those senses where you're able to ground yourself. Because it's easy to overreact. And we're not saying don't feel those feelings, right? It's not a matter of not feeling them because your feelings are always w- they're warranted, they're valid, they're going to come up. But it's how you respond when they do. It's identifying, "Hey, I'm feeling angry right now because I'm a human and I'm allowed to feel angry." And then how am I going to respond to that? Am I going to go take a break by myself or am I going to yell at the guy, on the side of the road because he's trying to tow my car and I'm frustrated because I need to get wherever I need to be.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Hold on. I'm going to grab a prop. I love
okay. And hello, Aswin.
like because as you're talking, and we're talking about joy, and we're all about. Have you seen one of these? I'm sure.
I have and I love it. Did you
I
make this one? Or
was that.
did you make this one?
No, this is. I just got this off of Amazon. I got a big one, and then I've got a little one that I bring to the school when I'm talking to kids about emotions. They love this thing, but I love this conversation too because all emotions are valid, absolutely, and they're also data. And so I think joy is also data. Joy is an emotion. I mean, you can feel that in your body, and it's something to pay attention to because it points us in the direction. So fear, okay, thank you. I'm feeling fear right now. Kind of assess the situation. What can I learn from that? It's like a data Excel spreadsheet or your bank account or P&L, anything else. It's information. So don't ignore it. Like give it some attention. And joy is a great one. That's our topic for today. Like joy, and the reason to pay attention to your sparks and your patterns is that it's information pointing you towards purpose, more joy, satisfaction, groundedness, all the good, juicy stuff that we want more of in our lives. And so starting to pay attention to that and really be like, yeah, okay, let's really feel it. Okay. And then you don't always have to grab onto it because nobody loves to feel sad for like days, right? But notice it, let it pass, pay attention to what it might be trying to tell you. And I love pulling the body into this because we're so head mind centric. Anytime we can get out of the head and into the body and start paying attention to the messages, I mean, only good things can come from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the feelings wheel. I love that you bring that to the school to teach your kids and you're also teaching your son to identify emotions. This is something that the school system lacks. We talked a little bit about this earlier. We're not learning how to regulate our emotions or identify them. Um, I think it's so important that and, a couple other pillars that would be fantastic that we start to teach kids earlier. And so if the school's not going to offer, or sometimes you get a really good teacher and they're able to integrate some of that stuff, right? But I like hiring somebody like you that teaches kids to do that for a living is just it's so cool because it fills a really really big gap in that space that is so needed because when kids do not learn how to regulate their emotions, which I never did, right? 4 homes before I was age 2 and I talk about this a lot. That creates a trauma in itself and I'm just in survival mode, right? As a baby, I'm sure, and as a toddler and moving through life and then hold on, I'm 30 years old and I don't know how to regulate myself. It's can be a scary thing, and I'm not the only adult. Because what I'll always say is you can look around, especially in the workplace, and tell who's done the work. I'm not judging the people that haven't, but when you can start to be introspective and sit with yourself, to Steph's point, it's a that's where miracles can happen because we have a locus of control. You have more control of yourself than you think you do. Not talking about the external factors. So,
No, I love that, and I think it's funny that you say that because kids that don't learn these tools become adults that don't have these tools, and that's where I first run into them, which is why I'm interested in working with kids now because I got to a boardroom and I got to work with executives, and I'm like, oh wow, like and to be fair, again, no judgment. This was me, I was like. I'm really pissed off. The only thing I can think of is I'll go for a really long run until I'm so tired I can't be mad anymore. And I'm like, that's there seems to be a better way. I'm sure there's a better way, right? But I had to like really learn that no one had ever taught, me how to do that. And so I think when you're dealing with, a CEO or even like a manager, it's a weird and hard thing to be like, okay, let's talk about feelings. But the reality is that is necessary. And so we're talking about nervous system regulation. We're talking about neuroscience. We're talking about hormonal balances, stress hormones, how these things work. And that's been kind of my gateway. I've been leaning on the science a lot because you can talk about science in the corporate setting. It's a little bit easier. But the bottom line is the message is exactly the same. And what I teach the adults is really similar to what I teach the kids. I mean, I wouldn't say that to the adults because I think they would be a little bit surprised by that. But the reality is exactly that. It's basics stuff.
It's the truth. You're in the C-suite meeting, you're gonna break out the feelings wheel and be like, "Okay,
How does this make you feel right now?
how are we feeling today?" It's truth. Check in with yourself.
Yeah.
There are a lot of executive people who are not so regulated. So I'm glad that you're in that space too, doing that work.
Uh,
Um,
yeah. Yeah. It's a funny I laugh, but it's a funny adventure for sure. Like one day talking to, adults and that own businesses and then, okay, I gotta go to the school now and you're talking to 7-year-olds and you end up talking about a lot of the same content, which is I mean, obviously delivered very differently, right? But the content at its core is
is
really
is the same. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Gosh, this has been such a fruitful conversation. I'm so happy to have met you on Substack. I'm excited to continue to get to know each other. And thank you for coming on. This has been fantastic. And I'm excited for you to share your resource too with people. As
Yeah, me too.
well. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and it was so fun to get to know you, and I'm really happy to share, the worksheet with everybody. I don't know how to do that, so you'll have to help me with that afterwards, but, uh,
Yeah.
I'm available. A lot of my Substack stuff is totally free if you just wanna, like, dip a toe in, and, if anybody is interested in going to the next, level in terms of the engagement and interaction, with my Substack, it's pretty new, and I'm offering a pretty good discount right now through the end of the year for, I think, 70% off annual membership, which is like $10 or $12 for the year, and I'm gonna experiment with it. So there's gonna be a little, back and forth, feedback if people are interested, and that's how I came up with the boundaries one. I just, like, looked at what was happening in the world, and I was like, "What are you guys struggling with the most right now? Is it overwhelm? Is it whatever?" And people are like, "This." And so this is how it came to the surface. So really stuff, really tactical, like, let's make it into action and see how we can support each other on our journeys, right?
I love that. Steph is the real deal, and that is a steal of a price. At the risk of sounding salesy, like that is, you're not gonna get. Listen,
And if you buy now
yeah. But we will share the worksheet attached to the article. I'm sure we'll both. What is your Substack called too?
the Substack is called Inner Edge Coaching,
Your
and
edge coaching.
yeah, from the inside out, right? So Inner Edge Coaching and, Stephanie by
Love
Steph.
it. Love it. We'll share that too. So if you're not following me or Steph, follow us. And Steph, thank you so much for joining and sharing your wisdom, your wealth of knowledge. This has been such a fun conversation. Thank you, everybody, for joining again. Happy Friday, no matter where you are in the world, wishing you a great weekend. And just take one spark from today and carry that into the weekend. Like Steph said, your joy is not random, it's data. So thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jen.
Bye. Thank you.